Charlotte Clark was 34 years old when her mother-in-law, Mia Clark, put her place in the family to a vote. It happened at the long dining table in the old Clark farmhouse, where Charlotte had once sat beside her late husband, Felix Clark. That evening, the room was too quiet. Mia stood at the head of the table and looked around like a judge. "All in favor?" she asked. One by one, every hand went up. Charlotte's 7-year-old son, Glenn, stood by the back door with grass stains on his knees. He looked at the raised hands, then ran to his mother. "Mom," Glenn whispered, "why are they doing this?" Charlotte could not answer. If she spoke, she knew she would scream. So she smiled, picked up Glenn, and walked out. What none of them knew was that Charlotte Clark had already been keeping records. She had dates, messages, phone calls, surprise visits, and every cruel word saved in her phone. 10 months before that dinner, Felix Clark had died in a scaffolding accident at a construction site. He was only 36. He had been careful, quiet, and steady, the kind of man who checked every bolt twice before letting anyone climb. The call came while Charlotte was working a night shift at Silica Hospital. A nurse touched her shoulder and said, "Your phone has been ringing for minutes." When Charlotte answered, the foreman's voice was flat. "I'm sorry," he said. "Felix didn't make it." Charlotte leaned against the hallway wall, smelling hospital sanitizer on her hands, and felt her whole world fall apart. Welcome back. Please like and do not forget to subscribe. After the funeral, Charlotte Clark tried to rebuild life for Glenn one small step at a time. She worked 3 night shifts every week, took Glenn to school in the morning, slept for a few hours, then woke up to cook, clean, and help with homework. Their little house felt too quiet without Felix Clark. Some days, Glenn drew pictures of his father standing on a cloud, smiling with a yellow hard hat. Other days, he sat on the porch and stared at the driveway like Felix might still come home. One evening, Glenn asked, "Is Grandma angry with us?" Charlotte held his hand and said, "No, baby. Grandma is just sad." At the time, Charlotte believed it. She did not yet know Mia Clark was not only grieving. Mia was rewriting the family story, and in that story, Charlotte was already gone. The Clark family had always held Sunday dinner once a month at Mia Clark's farmhouse. Charlotte Clark kept going because Glenn loved the place. He loved running in the yard, chasing Tyson, the old family dog, and hearing stories about how Felix Clark had played there as a boy. But 4 months after the funeral, Charlotte noticed her chair had been moved. The seat beside Felix's old chair was empty, with a folded napkin placed on the plate like they were saving it for a ghost. Charlotte's new seat was at the far end, near the wall. During dinner, Mia said, "I think Glenn should attend school closer to this house." Charlotte put down her fork. "He already has friends at his school." Mia smiled coldly. "This is a family matter, dear. We will handle it." That night, Charlotte Clark drove home and saw a missed call from Glenn's school. The secretary had left a message saying Mia Clark had called to ask about enrollment for her grandson. Charlotte sat in the driveway with both hands on the steering wheel. Mia had contacted the school without permission. That was when Charlotte opened her phone and typed the first note. "Mia called Glenn's school without asking me." After that, the pattern became clear. Hannah began arriving without warning to take Glenn for ice cream. One afternoon, Hannah kept him for 3 hours and ignored Charlotte's calls. When Charlotte finally reached her, Hannah said, "Relax. He is with family." Charlotte answered, "He is my son." Hannah laughed. "You do not really belong here anymore, Charlotte." That was when Charlotte understood. They were preparing to erase her. The small disrespect continued until it no longer felt small. At the next Sunday dinner, Mia Clark invited 4 women from Ebenezer Community Church but did not tell Charlotte Clark. When Charlotte arrived in simple jeans and a tired smile, the room was full of strangers who already seemed to know her private pain. One woman asked, "How are you managing alone with Glenn?" Another said, "Have you considered letting him spend summer at the farm?" Charlotte looked at Mia, but Mia only smiled. "People are just concerned, dear." Charlotte understood the game. Mia had made herself the worried grandmother and painted Charlotte as the unstable widow. That night, Charlotte went home and wrote every word down. A few days later, Timothy Clark, Felix Clark's younger brother, came to Charlotte Clark's house. That surprised Charlotte, because Timothy rarely visited unless he wanted something. He stood on the porch and said, "I came to check if you need help with Felix's old things." Inside the kitchen, Timothy drank coffee but kept looking toward the hallway that led to Felix's office. After a few minutes, he asked, "Have you gone through his papers yet? Bank files, work records, old folders?" Charlotte kept her face calm. "Not yet," she said. "I have been busy with Glenn and work." Timothy nodded too quickly. "Good. No rush." When he left, Charlotte saw him stop his truck down the road and make a fast phone call. That Sunday, Charlotte Clark took Glenn to Ebenezer Community Church. She refused to let Mia Clark take that place from her too. Felix Clark had taken her there when they were newly married, and Charlotte had worshipped there for years. But that morning, the smiles were different. People who usually hugged her looked away. After service, a woman named Janet touched Charlotte's arm. "Mia said you have been difficult about Glenn's family arrangements," Janet whispered. "Is everything okay at home?" Charlotte held her purse tightly. "There are no arrangements, Janet. I am Glenn's mother." Janet stepped back, embarrassed. In the car, Glenn asked, "Mom, why does Grandma not smile at us anymore?" Charlotte answered softly, "She is still sad about Dad." The next morning, Pastor Maverick called Charlotte Clark while she was folding Glenn's school clothes. His voice was careful, like he already knew he had stepped into something wrong. "Charlotte, maybe a family meeting could help everyone heal," he said. Charlotte stopped folding. "Did Mia Clark ask you to call me?" There was silence. Then Pastor Maverick said, "I just think communication may help." Charlotte looked at Felix Clark's picture on the wall. "Communication is not the problem, Pastor. The problem is that they do not want to hear me." She ended the call politely, but her hands shook. That night, after Glenn slept, Charlotte opened her phone notes again. She added Janet's comment, Pastor Maverick's call, and everything she remembered. 3 days later, Mia Clark called Charlotte Clark with a voice that sounded too sweet to trust. "Charlotte, I want the whole family together this Sunday," she said. "Bring Glenn. I will make his favorite fried chicken." Charlotte looked toward the living room, where Glenn was already smiling because he had heard the word farm and wanted to see Tyson. After the call, Charlotte phoned Rosa Reed, her closest friend from Silica Hospital. "Something feels wrong," Charlotte said. Rosa answered, "Then do not go." Charlotte sighed. "Glenn wants to see the dog." Rosa became quiet. "Then go, but keep your eyes open. Write everything down afterward." On Sunday evening, Charlotte drove to the farmhouse and saw too many cars in the driveway. Charlotte Clark parked beside the farmhouse and counted the cars before stepping out. Mia Clark's sedan was there. Hannah's SUV was there. Timothy Clark's truck was there too. But there were 2 other cars Charlotte did not recognize, both with church stickers on the back. Her stomach tightened. "Mom, can I go see Tyson?" Glenn asked, already pulling at his seat belt. Charlotte forced a smile. "Go ahead, baby. Stay close." But Glenn ran toward the porch before she could say more, and Tyson came barking happily from the yard. Charlotte stayed in the car for a moment and typed into her phone. "Sunday dinner. Extra cars. Church people present. Feels planned." Then she walked toward the house. The dining room looked too perfect. Mia Clark had used the good plates, polished silverware, and white cloth napkins she only brought out when she wanted people to feel the weight of an occasion. Charlotte Clark counted 10 seats around the table. Mia sat at the head. Hannah sat to her left. Timothy Clark sat near the far end, staring down at his plate. 4 church women sat together, including Janet. There was 1 chair for Charlotte, placed near the wall again, far from where Felix Clark used to sit. Mia smiled. "We are so glad you came, dear." Charlotte answered, "I said I would." Her voice was calm, but her hands were cold. Everyone seemed to know something she did not. Dinner moved slowly. Everyone talked about safe things: the weather, the church charity sale, Hannah's dentist appointment, and the coming rain. Nobody mentioned Felix Clark. Nobody asked Charlotte Clark how she was surviving. Nobody truly asked about Glenn, except to say he was growing fast. The church women watched Charlotte each time she lifted her fork, as if they were waiting for her to break down and prove whatever story Mia Clark had told them. Charlotte kept her face still. She had learned that skill at Silica Hospital, standing beside angry parents and frightened children without letting fear show. After the plates were cleared, Mia folded her napkin and stood. The room became quiet. Charlotte felt her back straighten. She knew bad news was coming. "I have been thinking about this for a long time," Mia Clark said. "And I have spoken to everyone here privately." Charlotte Clark looked at Hannah, then at Timothy Clark, then at Janet and the other church women. None of them looked surprised. Mia continued, "Since Felix Clark died, this family has been under strain. We all loved him. We all miss him. But some things have become unhealthy." Charlotte held her breath. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Mia placed one hand over her chest. "This is not meant to hurt you, Charlotte. It is about what is best for Glenn and this family." Then Mia lifted her chin. "We need to decide whether you should continue attending family events." Then Mia Clark said the words that stayed with Charlotte Clark forever. "I would like to put it to a vote." Charlotte almost laughed because it sounded impossible. A vote. As if marriage could be erased by raised hands. As if Glenn's mother could be removed from Felix Clark's family by people who had not held Glenn through nightmares. Mia looked around the table. All in favor? Her hand went up first. Timothy Clark's hand followed quickly. Hannah raised hers without looking at Charlotte. Then Janet and the other women raised theirs too. 8 hands. Charlotte counted them because counting was all her mind could do. At that moment, the back door opened. Glenn stepped inside with grass stains on his knees and Tyson behind him. Glenn looked around the dining room and saw every hand raised against his mother. His smile disappeared. Tyson stood beside him, wagging his tail slowly, as if even the dog could feel the coldness in the room. Glenn walked to Charlotte Clark, grabbed her sleeve, and whispered, "Mom, why are they doing this?" Charlotte felt her throat close. She wanted to scream at Mia Clark, Hannah, Timothy Clark, and every woman at that table. But if she screamed, they would call her unstable. If Glenn became frightened, Mia would use that too. So Charlotte stood, lifted Glenn into her arms, and said, "I will not fight you here, Mia. Not in front of my son." No one followed Charlotte Clark when she walked out. The screen door shut behind her, and the sound felt final. She buckled Glenn into the car, drove home at the speed limit, and did not speak until they reached their driveway. Inside the dark car, Charlotte finally broke down. Glenn reached from the back seat and held her hand. "Mom, are we still family?" he asked. Charlotte wiped her face and turned toward him. "You and I are family, sweetheart. Your father is still our family too." Glenn nodded, but his eyes looked older than 7. That night, after he slept, Charlotte opened her phone notes and added the vote. 8 hands. 4 church witnesses. 1 child watching. Premeditated. The next few days moved slowly. Charlotte Clark went to Silica Hospital, came home, cooked simple meals, helped Glenn with homework, and read him bedtime stories. She did not cry again. Her body seemed to have decided one breakdown was enough. At work, Rosa Reed found her in the break room staring at her phone. "What are you going to do?" Rosa asked. Charlotte looked at her notes, then at her coffee. "I do not know yet," she said. "But I am done smiling through it." Rosa sat beside her. "Good. Because that smile was starting to scare me." Charlotte almost laughed. Almost. Deep inside, something had shifted. She was no longer begging for peace. She was preparing for truth. The answer came 3 days later inside Felix Clark's old winter jacket. Charlotte Clark had avoided his closet for months because every shirt still smelled like him. But that evening, she opened the door and touched his work clothes one by one. In the inside pocket of his heavy brown jacket, she found a sealed envelope with her name written in Felix's block handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. The letter had been written before a small surgery he had once had, long before the accident. If you are reading this, Felix Clark had written, something went wrong. Take care of Glenn. And about my family, I love them, but I know who they are. Charlotte sat on the closet floor and kept reading. The last part of Felix Clark's letter made Charlotte Clark cover her mouth. Felix wrote, Mia Clark means well, but she holds on too tightly. Hannah has pain she throws at other people. And watch Timothy Clark. He owes me money, and he is slippery about it. Then came the line that pierced Charlotte's heart. If they ever make you choose between your dignity and their approval, choose your dignity. You earned that long before you met me. Charlotte read the letter 3 times. Felix had known. 4 years, he had stood between her and his family. Now that he was gone, the wall had fallen. Charlotte folded the letter carefully and placed it in her own drawer. It belonged to her now. That night, Charlotte Clark sat at the kitchen table and searched for answers. She read about surviving parents, custody rights, grandparent visitation, and legal letters. She was not a lawyer, but she was a nurse, and nurses knew how to read complicated information under pressure. The next morning, she called an attorney named Margaret Hale. "What is the issue?" the receptionist asked. Charlotte took a breath. "Family harassment," she said, "and how to set a boundary before it becomes a lawsuit." That afternoon, Charlotte sat in Margaret Hale's office and told her everything. The chair change. The school call. Hannah's surprise pickups. The church gossip. Pastor Maverick's call. The vote. Margaret listened without interrupting, then said, "This is a pattern." Margaret Hale tapped Charlotte Clark's phone notes with one finger. "You are Glenn's mother. You are his surviving parent. Mia Clark has no right to make decisions for him." Charlotte swallowed hard. "Can I stop this without going to court?" Margaret nodded. "We can send a formal letter. It will state your rights, list the harassment, and warn them to stop." Then Charlotte remembered Felix Clark's letter. "There is something about Timothy Clark owing Felix money," she said. Margaret's face changed. "Then check every file your husband kept. Bank records, notes, folders, anything with Timothy's name on it." Charlotte went home, opened the filing cabinet in the garage, and began searching through Felix's papers. Behind old tax returns and work papers, Charlotte Clark found a folder labeled Timothy in Felix Clark's handwriting. Inside was a signed promissory note for $18,000. Timothy Clark had borrowed the money from Felix 2 years before the accident and promised to pay $500 every month. Beside the payment schedule, Felix had written 12 zeros in pencil. Not one payment had been made. There were printed messages, too. Timothy had written, "I will pay you back when the shop improves. Please do not tell Mia Clark." Charlotte sat on the garage floor with the folder in her lap. Suddenly, Timothy's strange visit made sense. He did not want Charlotte gone because of Glenn. He wanted her gone because of the debt. The next morning, Charlotte Clark brought everything to Margaret Hale. She brought the phone notes, the promissory note, the printed messages, and Felix Clark's letter. Margaret spread the papers across her desk and read in silence. When she finished, she removed her glasses. "This changes everything," Margaret said. "Timothy Clark owes Felix's estate, and as administrator, you can demand repayment." Charlotte shook her head. "I do not want to destroy them. I only want them to stop." Margaret nodded. "Then the letter will do 3 things. It will confirm your authority over Glenn, document the harassment, and demand repayment from Timothy." Charlotte looked at the papers. "Let me approve every word before you send it." The letter went out on a Tuesday. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. But before Mia Clark received it, she made her next move. She called Silica Hospital and asked to speak with Charlotte Clark's supervisor. Mia said she was concerned that a recently widowed single mother might not be emotionally fit to work as a nurse. She used soft words, but the meaning was cruel. Human Resources called Charlotte during her shift. The complaint was unfounded, the HR officer said. "No action will be taken, but we must inform you." Charlotte stood in the break room, cold anger rising through her body. Mia had tried to touch the job that paid for Glenn's food, school supplies, and home. Charlotte added it to her records. The next afternoon, Charlotte Clark picked up Glenn from school, and his teacher, Mrs. Allen, was waiting at the classroom door. "Charlotte, may I speak with you?" she asked. Charlotte's chest tightened. Mrs. Allen lowered her voice. "Hannah came today. She said she was on the pickup list and wanted to take Glenn early." Charlotte froze. "What did you tell her?" Mrs. Allen answered, "I told her she was not authorized." Charlotte hugged Glenn tightly, smelling glue sticks and playground dust on his shirt. In the car, she called Hannah. "Do not ever go to my child's school without my permission again," Charlotte said. Hannah snapped, "You do not belong here anymore." Charlotte ended the call and contacted the school. That evening, Charlotte Clark updated Glenn's school file. Only Charlotte could approve pickups. No exceptions. She sent the confirmation to Margaret Hale and added another note to her records. After dinner, Charlotte and Glenn sat on the porch with jars for fireflies. Glenn caught 3 and named them Flash, Biscuit, and Felix Jr. Charlotte laughed softly, then covered her mouth. Glenn looked up. "Dad used to say fireflies were lanterns for people walking in the dark," he said. Charlotte felt tears press behind her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. Glenn leaned against her. "Are we walking in the dark, Mom?" Charlotte wrapped one arm around him. "We were, baby. But I think I found a lantern." On Thursday afternoon, Margaret Hale's office called Charlotte Clark. "Certified delivery confirmed," the receptionist said. Mia Clark signed for the letter at 1:47 p.m. Charlotte was in the cafeteria at Silica Hospital, eating a sandwich beside Rosa Reed. 6 minutes later, her phone rang. It was Mia. Charlotte let it go to voicemail. Mia called again. Then again. On the third call, Charlotte answered. Mia's voice was sharp. "What have you done, Charlotte?" Charlotte stood from the table. "I set a boundary in writing." Mia snapped, "You sent a lawyer after your own family." Charlotte replied, "My attorney sent facts. Everything in that letter is documented." Mia breathed heavily, then said, "Family meeting. Saturday. You will come." By Saturday morning, Charlotte Clark had prepared everything. She placed Felix Clark's letter, the promissory note, the printed messages, her phone records, and Margaret Hale's legal letter into one folder. Rosa Reed stopped by after her shift and watched Charlotte arrange the papers. "You do not have to go," Rosa said. "Let the lawyer handle it." Charlotte looked at the folder. "One day, Glenn may ask what I did when his grandmother tried to vote me out. I want to tell him I stood in that room and set the terms myself." Rosa nodded. "Then go. But call me if you need help." Charlotte chose a navy blouse and dark jeans. She was not dressing for war. She was dressing for closure. At 10 o'clock Saturday morning, Charlotte Clark drove to Mia Clark's farmhouse. Glenn stayed with Mrs. Parker, a kind neighbor who often babysat him. He did not need to see this part. The road was bright with summer sun, but Charlotte's hands stayed firm on the wheel. In the driveway, she saw 3 cars, Mia's, Hannah's, and Timothy Clark's. No church witnesses this time. No audience. Just the people who had raised their hands against her. Charlotte carried the folder to the porch and pushed open the screen door. Inside, the grandfather clock ticked loudly. Mia, Hannah, and Timothy sat at the same dining table. Mia held the legal letter and said, "Sit down, Charlotte." Charlotte remained standing. "No," she said. "This time, I will speak first." Mia Clark's face tightened when Charlotte Clark refused to sit. Hannah looked down at her hands, and Timothy Clark kept tapping one foot beneath the table. Charlotte placed the folder on the table and opened it slowly. "This is not a fight," Charlotte said. "This is the end of confusion." Mia lifted the attorney's letter. "You embarrassed this family." Charlotte looked at her calmly. "No, Mia. You embarrassed this family when you put my place to a vote in front of Glenn." The room went silent. Charlotte turned to Hannah. You tried to take my son from school without permission. Then she looked at Timothy. And you tried to hide a debt from your dead brother's estate. Timothy Clark went pale. Mia Clark turned sharply toward him. What debt? She asked. Charlotte Clark removed the promissory note and laid it flat on the table. Felix Clark loaned Timothy $18,000 2 years before he died. Timothy promised to repay $500 each month. Charlotte pointed to the schedule. Not one payment was made. Hannah leaned forward, shocked. Timothy, is this true? Timothy swallowed hard. It was between me and Felix. Charlotte's voice stayed even. Felix is gone. That means the debt belongs to his estate. I am the estate administrator. Mia picked up the paper with trembling hands. For the first time, she looked at Timothy as if she did not recognize him. Mia Clark's voice broke with anger. You told me Charlotte Clark was the problem. Timothy Clark looked away. I only said things would be easier if she was not around so much. Charlotte watched Mia hear the truth inside those words. Timothy had used Mia's grief to protect himself. Hannah covered her mouth. So the vote was not about Glenn, she whispered. Charlotte closed the folder halfway. It was never about Glenn. It was about control, guilt, and money. Mia sat back slowly, still holding the note. Her pride fought her shame, but shame was winning. Charlotte did not smile. She had not come to enjoy their fall. She had come to stop them from pulling Glenn down with them. Hannah began to cry quietly. I only wanted to see Glenn, she said. He reminds me of Felix Clark. Charlotte Clark softened, but only a little. That is the problem, Hannah. Glenn is not a replacement for Felix. He is a child. My child. Hannah wiped her face. I miss my brother. Charlotte nodded. So do I. Every day. But grief does not give anyone the right to disrespect his widow or frighten his son. Hannah lowered her head. I am sorry about the school, Charlotte answered. Then prove it with your actions. Ask before you visit. Ask before you take him anywhere. Respect my answer, even when it is no. Hannah nodded, too ashamed to argue. Then Mia Clark stood. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. You think a lawyer's letter makes you powerful? She asked. Charlotte Clark met her eyes. No. Being Glenn's mother makes me responsible. The letter only reminds you of that. Mia's lips trembled. Felix Clark would never have wanted this. Charlotte had waited for those words. She reached into the folder and touched Felix's letter but did not pull it out. Felix wrote me something before he died, Charlotte said. He told me that if your family ever made me choose between my dignity and your approval, I should choose my dignity. Mia froze. Charlotte added softly, He loved you, Mia. But he also knew you. For a moment, nobody spoke. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway, heavy and steady. Mia Clark lowered herself back into the chair, and Timothy Clark stared at the table like the wood might open and swallow him. Charlotte Clark closed the folder. Here are my terms, she said. No one contacts Glenn's school except me. No one contacts my job. No one takes Glenn anywhere without my written permission. No one speaks badly about me around him. Hannah nodded quickly. Timothy said nothing, Mia whispered. And if we refuse? Charlotte looked at each of them. Then the next letter will not be a warning. It will be a court petition. Charlotte Clark picked up the folder and stepped back from the table. I am not keeping Glenn from his father's family, she said. I am keeping him from harm. Mia Clark looked toward Felix Clark's empty chair, and her face finally cracked. I lost my son, she whispered. Charlotte answered gently. So did Glenn. And he should not have to lose peace too. Mia covered her mouth. Charlotte walked toward the door, then stopped. If you want to see Glenn, contact me with respect. If you can do that, he can know you. If you cannot, he will still be loved, protected, and whole. Then Charlotte opened the screen door and stepped into the sunlight. The first week after that meeting was silent. No surprise visits. No church gossip. No calls to Silica Hospital. No one appeared at Glenn's school. Charlotte Clark worked, cooked dinner, read bedtime stories, and breathed easier for the first time in months. 2 weeks later, Timothy Clark sent a message through Margaret Hale. He agreed to repay the debt in monthly payments. 3 weeks later, Hannah texted Charlotte. "May I see Glenn on Saturday? I can pick him up at noon and bring him back by 3. Charlotte read the message twice. It was the first time Hannah had asked instead of assumed. Charlotte replied, "Yes. Please text when you arrive." Hannah did exactly that. Mia Clark took longer. 6 weeks passed before Charlotte Clark found a handwritten note in her mailbox. It said, "I was wrong about the vote. I do not know how to fix it, but I would like to try." It was not perfect, but it was a beginning. Charlotte waited a few days before answering. Then she invited Mia for coffee, just the two of them. The meeting was awkward, careful, and quiet. Mia did not fully apologize, and Charlotte did not force her. They talked about Glenn's swimming lessons, Tyson's old legs, and the tomatoes in Mia's garden. It was not healing yet, but it was no longer war. That Sunday, at Ebenezer Community Church, Janet approached Charlotte and said, "We should have asked you directly." Charlotte replied, "Yes, you should have." One evening, Glenn drew a new family picture and taped it to the refrigerator. Charlotte Clark stood in the center, holding a nurse's bag. Felix Clark smiled from a cloud, wearing his hard hat. Mia Clark stood to the side with Tyson beside her. Hannah was near the porch. Timothy Clark was smaller, almost hidden behind a tree. Charlotte looked at the picture and understood. Glenn had not erased anyone. He had simply placed them where they belonged. Family was not a vote. It was not raised hands at a table. It was love, respect, truth, and boundaries. Charlotte had walked out with a broken heart, but she came back with proof, dignity, and peace. And when Glenn held her hand that night, she knew the people who mattered did not raise their hands against you. They held yours. And if this story made you think of someone who needs a little courage today, please share it with them. Thank you for staying until the end. Leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next story.